Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm Paula Jenkins, and I'm the host of Jumpstart Your Joy. In this video, I'm going to be talking to William J. Peters all about his brand new book, At Heaven's Door. It's a really great read, and I enjoyed it. He talks all about shared death experiences in it, and we're going to talk about why he wrote it, what you can learn from it. He'll tell you a little bit about the shared death experiences and the clients that he's worked with. And I think you're just going to love this conversation because it's such a fascinating topic. So here we go to the interview. I know you had experiences early on, maybe in teenage years, that kind of maybe tipped your hand towards where you are now. But how would you say that you arrived at this space where, you're really focused on working with people in grief and bereavement and shared death experiences?
I've pondered this quite a bit. And I think you're right in terms of that first experience that you alluded to when I was 17 years old was a classic near-death experience. I was skiing in Squaw Valley, right outside Lake Tahoe. Typical, ordinary day. And I was racing down the mountain and I caught an edge and was catapulted into the air. In the air a long time. So when I landed, my skis didn't release. And so I crushed my spine and I was catapulted out of my body. I was dark for a while. Like there was no sensation or sense of aliveness for a while. When I came to, I was moving away from the ski area, my body, of course, and I was moving away quickly. So first I saw I was enamored. I should say it was not a painful experience at all. It was quite beautiful and I felt lovely. But I was moving away quickly from the planet. And I remember seeing Lake Tahoe, then San Francisco Bay Area, continental US. And then I was in this beautiful solar system. And during this time, my life was being reviewed, everything I'd done up to that point. And the review was very informative and a bit, I should say, got my attention. What I saw was it was a karmic teaching in terms of everything that I had done mattered. So if I had been kind to someone, that had a positive repercussions that rippled out. If I'd been kind of mean or not nice, then that had its own set of negative repercussions. And so I got that teaching, and then I found myself in this tunnel and the light appeared, this big, beautiful, luminous light. And I identified that light as God. And I just said, wow, I'm dying and I don't want to die. And unlike the majority of near-death experiencers who are very much at peace, I was at peace, but until that point, most near-death experiencers are fine. They're like, okay, this is great. I'm much better than where I was on planet Earth. In my case, I was like, no. I haven't done what I came here to do. I need to return. And I pled with this God who was so powerful and so loving and ominous. And all of a sudden I felt a pushback and a very strong, sincere, make something of your life. And then I spun back into my body. And that was a whole nother thing that I didn't know how I was going to get back into my body, but I made it. So, that experience really impacted me, but I didn't talk about that experience for, I think, about a decade. I don't even know that I had it, quite frankly. In terms of my conscious living, if someone asked me if I had a spiritual experience, I would say, I don't think so. But it moved me unconsciously because I found myself, I was in chronic pain from this spinal injury. I was, walking, but I wasn't able to do any more sports or any more really heavy lifting. I was constantly, I couldn't sit anymore. So my life changed a lot. And I became more introspective, found myself a few years later in the San Francisco Bay Area and Skid Row area, the Tenderloin of San Francisco, doing social work. And there I had a profound experience because it was the late 80s, early 90s, and the AIDS epidemic had broken out in a big way. I was working with a lot of primarily gay men who were losing their brothers. They were, a lot had HIV. They all felt the stress and strain of realizing any one of them could be next. And I was working with this community a great deal. And I was working with one person who really, I developed a good relationship with it. His name was Brad. And he was almost like a shaman to this community. He lived in a homeless encampment with his brothers, as he called them. One morning he came in and he was exhausted. And I looked at him and I said, he looked disheveled and beleaguered. And I said, Brad, what happened? What's up? And he shared with me, he says, oh, well, Randy died last night. I said, oh, I'm so sorry. And he says, yeah, I am too, but it was so beautiful. And I said, beautiful? He said, tell me. He said, well, when he was dying, we were all surrounding him, and a cylinder of light came down, and he rose into that cylinder of light. And when he got above us, he stopped and he looked at all of us and said, thank you for caring for me and loving me. And he looked younger and healthy and out of pain, and then he disappeared. And that was the first real shared death experience that I had heard. They did not have a name at this time, but it stuck with me. I would hear other experiences like that, a lot of different experiences in that community, but no one really talked too loudly about it. And I worked in the Zen hospice later as well, and there I would have more shared death experiences. One that really sealed it for me when I was reading to an individual, call him Ron, and he was very close to death. And just reading him a story, as I had done, every day that I was sat with him. And during the middle of the story, I popped out of my body and was suspended with Ron above my body and his body. And he looked at me, as you do in that realm. I saw his big face, still see it now, with a smile, big teeth and big eyes, just really his face, and just said, check this out. I mean, he was really getting me to see that this is where he was spending some time and that he was at peace. And I was just taken back. Then I landed back in my body. I don't know how much time eclipsed. And that was it. So that's how I got into this. Later, I would hear Raymond Moody, who did the initial research on this and then started the Shared Crossing Project. And as a psychotherapist, I'd been working for a couple decades in grief and bereavement, and was always interested in transpersonal spiritual issues in life in general, but then found out that there's so many of them in end of life that I just focused.
That's also very powerful. And reading your book, I got this sense that there are some people that are maybe more in tune or make themselves more available to hearing and experiencing this kind of thing with other people. The way that the one woman talked about the son, Ben, I think she knew he would come back and sometimes when she needed him. I love that you talked about that piece as well, that even after a shared death experience, sometimes people will come back and stay with you for a bit of the journey.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have that profound example of Michelle losing her son, Ben, at birth, although he was on life support for a few weeks in Australia.
Yeah.
This can begin a relationship that takes place between the living, which is those of us who are still here, and the deceased. And we call this continuing bonds. There's a whole therapy, those of us in grief and bereavement are familiar with the continuing bonds model of therapy, if you will. And people report that synchronistic events, leaving signs here and there, or just coming to them in sleep states, not dreams. Dreams are different.
I mean, the 3 stories that you heard are in the book, and there's so many other stories. And I feel like the power of this is that you get to hear these stories of real people told in a very authentic way. And then we get your clinical experience on top of it to better understand like what's going on with these people. And I love how it unfolds in that way because you want to dig in and read it, like because you just don't want to put it down. And I love that about a book as in nonfiction. If you want to talk about it a little bit more, I really enjoyed it. So thank you for putting it out there for us.
Well, thank you for reading it, taking the time to, spend some time with it and read it. And what you said, I loved hearing what you said because that's what I try to do. I try to let these ordinary people like you and I from all over the globe talk about their experiences. I mean, we kicked the book off with somebody in Australia, a mother in Australia, and a mother in West Virginia, both losing a child and having a very similar experience. The similar experience being that they both saw their deceased loved ones, grandparents in one case, father in the other case, come down and say, essentially, I'm going to take your baby. I'm going to take care of, him. In both cases, they were boys.
Yeah.
And that's so powerful. And I just try to let these personal stories speak for themselves. And then the pattern is so profound. I've seen it, hundreds of times now. So I can easily, and I really try to identify what it is that makes up a shared death experience, why this pattern is so easy to define, how common it is. And then of course I talk about how meaningful it is. Ultimately, the stories are phenomenal, but they're helpful in not just pointing to who we are as human beings, but pointing to who we are beyond our human life, the essence, the soul, the spirit of us. And almost every experiencer will say, I survived this life. I know that. And that's a gift. And it helps me realize how precious this human experience is. But it also helps me know that where I'm going next is also a benevolent, loving realm that I'm looking forward to. So it just enriches my life in every way.
Yeah. If somebody wants to get a copy of At Heaven's Door, where can they find it? And also, if you want to talk a little bit more about the Shared Crossing Project, also fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah. So the book can be purchased pretty much anywhere where you have whoever your favorite book purveyor is. I'm blessed to be with Simon & Schuster. They're making this one of their lead books for 2022. They're kicking off with it. I have loved working with them. They've been just so professional. And if you have a local bookstore, all you have to do is, because I love supporting local bookstores, you can just call them up and they can get it really quickly. So thank you for that. The Shared Crossing Project, I mean, we're death educators, really, as well as researchers. I mean, that boil it down, stated simply, we help people understand what these spiritual, transcendental experiences are at the end of life, all of them. I've created a whole spectrum of end of life experiences. You can see that. There's resources on our webpage. And then we have programs. We used to do everything in person, and now we're moving everything online. So we're kicking off a slate of programs, and I'll primarily be the teacher, and I have some others on our staff that will be helping as well. So please check us out. If it's interesting, great. If you have a story, any end of life story, then just go to our website and you can submit it, and our team will get back to you pretty quickly. That whole book is written because people took the courage to share their story, just putting it out there. And we read them, we study them, and then we'll get back to you.
Thanks for tuning in. This is going to be part 1 of a 3-part series where I'm talking to William J. Peters about this brand new book. If you want to buy his book, you'll find the link in the description below. Or if you want to listen to our entire discussion, you can listen to it on the podcast. And if you like what you're hearing and you want to stay in touch, please hit that subscribe button and hit the bell so you'll get notified for future episodes. Thanks so much for tuning in.